Okay, today's topic is subnetting, and let's take a look at what we learned last time. So if you look at this subnetting example, and then let's take a look at this lecture note briefly. So, oops, okay. So basically, what? When I give you subnetting problems, right? As long as you can answer these five questions, you are in a good shape. So how many subnets does the chosen subnet mask produce? So basically how many subnets and how many valid hosts per subnet are available. So how many um, valid host IP addresses per each subnet, and what are the valid subnets? So basically what is the network address of each subnet, and then what are the broadcast address for each subnet, and what are the valid host for each subnet. So as long as you can answer these five questions, I think you are in the good shape. So and so go to contents. There's one more thing. Just let's briefly review what we learned last time. This is something that I covered last time, and if you look at the lecture pp2.px, so we learned that the idea of subnetting is what? We're dividing a network, right, into many different pieces of subnet, right? So basically, this is an analogy that I used last time, right? So we have a big barrel of apple, and then if you want to divide it into this big bucket, into what many different pieces of small buckets, right, with the same size. So this basically the same thing is like when you have a network, right? When you apply subnetting, you're pretty much dividing this big network into many different small network with the same size. Okay, so today we covered this example last in the previous lecture, so I'm going to cover the next example. So network mask is the network address is 192.168.10.0, and then subnet mask is 255, 255, 255.128. So so let's take a look at this problem. Okay, so let's see. So just like I said, well, there's three problems. Three conditions are typically given, right? I'm saying this is what class uh, C subnetting problem first, and then in this case, what I give you the IP address, which is 192.168.10.0. This could be a network address, right? I give you network address or just IP address, and then 10.0. So since this is class C, the fourth octets are going to use a binary because that's where the action is. So like 1, 2, 3, what? 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, right? And the subnet mask is 255, and then 255.255.128. So 128 is, if you convert 128 to binary, it's going to be 1000, right? So this is a subnet mask given. So this is a subnet mask is given, right? And so this is 1 here. So first of all, this is what? This is a class C, right? And so I'm going to draw the line here. This is class C, right? And then what the next is, I need to draw the line where the 1 end, right? So there is 1 end and 0 begins, so I'm going to draw the line here, right? So basically, if you look at this IP address, right? I mean, this is where my subnet. This is a subnet mask, right? And I drew the green line because this is class C. So basically, IP address is hierarchical, right? So first, what you have. So this is for the class C, right? This is a class C, and then so this is pretty much your network portions, and then this is what this is your subnet portions, and then the rest of them is what this is your host portions. This is your host portions, right? So when you typically draw the line, right, based on subnet mask, right? This is subnet mask. Without subnetting, right? Your left side is what network portions, and your right side host portion. But when I say this problem is subnetting, right? Your left side is not 100% network portion, right? Your left side is pretty much what? Your left side is really what? It consists of network portions and subnet portions, right? So, and then in this particular case, since it's 192, only one bits are used for the subnetting portions. So basically, the x is 1, right? And then in classic subnetting, x plus y, I mean this is y, right? Is typical is what is y. So we know that it's from this we know that is y is equal to 7. The first question is the first question is how many subnets. So since we only have 1 bits for subnetting, so either 0 or 1, right, with the 1 bit. So number of subnets is basically what? 2 to the x, which is just 2, because we have what? Only 2 subnets. This means that, and this is so basically what this means is we have, let's say this is like a bucket, right? One big bucket, but since we have 2 subnets, we can divide it by this into 2 different pieces, right? And then this is subnet 0 and this is subnet number 1. Okay, number 2. So what is the number of host addresses what is the number of usable host addresses per each subnet? I mean, since this is a class B, what we know that the size of this big bucket, right, this whole address is what? 256. Since we divide by 2, we know that this is 128, right? But also we can use some math to find number of usable host IP addresses per each subnet, right? Is basically 2 to the y minus 2, and then y is what? The 7. So 2 to the 7 minus 2, right? It's so that's the answer. So it's probably what? If you just divide by this, it's going to be 128, right? So basically this is 128 and minus 2, which is 126. Okay, number 3. So what is a valid subnet IP address? So valid subnet IP address is basically what? valid the subnet IP addresses, meaning the network is the same as what? The network address of each subnet. So what is the network address for the subnet 1 and what is the network address for the subnet number 1? I mean 0 and 1. So the formula, right? The formula that I introduced last time in the last lecture is what? 256 minus, since the subnet mask is what? This is 255 dot 255 that is 190 what actually sorry, it's a 128, right? 128, right? So 255 dot 128. So 256 minus 128, so this is just formula. So 256 minus subnet mask given, in this case is 128, so we have 128. So we know that what the network address really what it's really the multitude of 128. So we know that the first one is starting from the 0, right? And then it's 128. And if you just add 128, it's going to be what? 256. So the 256 cannot be an address. So we know that it's 0 and 128. So we know that the first network address is what? 192.168.10.0, right? That's a network address for the subnet number 0. And the subnet number 1, the network address for the subnet mask, the network address for the subnet number 1 is really 128, which means 192.168.10.128. Okay? So number 4. So number 4 is what? Number 4 is what is the broadcast address of each subnet, right? Broadcast. If you think about the broadcast, right? Broadcast address is what? Always. So let's say, okay. First find the broadcast address of the subnet 0, right? Is what? The network address of the subnet number 1 minus 1, right? So which is 192.168.10.127. So the broadcast address of the subnet number 0 is 192.168.10.127. And the broadcast address of the subnet number 1 is basically what? The last one, which is 255. And 8.10.255. Okay? So it's number 5. It's really about, like, I'm going to ask about what is like the first usable host IP address of a subnet number 1. So what is like a last usable host IP address of the subnet number 1, etc. So let's just try to find the first usable host IP address of the subnet number 0. In the first usable host IP address is 10.1, right? So last usable host IP address of the subnet number 0, or I will say first subnet, and this is the second subnet, or I will say subnet number 1. Okay, so its last one is 192.168.10.126 is the last usable host IP address of the first subnet or subnet number 0. Okay, so the first usable host IP address of the second subnet or the first usable host IP address of the subnet number 1 is 10.129, right? And the last usable host IP address of the second subnet or subnet number 1 is 192.168.10.254. Okay, so if you want to actually there is a solutions. If you take a look at our class website, if you go to this image, click this image, then pretty much the same explanation, right? So you can either look at my lecture, this lecture video clip, or you can take a look at this image. I mean, the same thing, pretty much. Okay, thank you. So let me stop this.